Title: Option 1, My Fiancé Cheated the Night. I tried to tell him I was pregnant. 5 years later, karma made him beg title. Option 2, he cheated after proposing to me. Then lost everything before learning my biggest secret thumbnail text. I was pregnant. Or he lost everything. Have you ever waited years for someone you love to finally choose you, only to discover they were never the person you believed they were? I spent 7 years loving one man in silence. When he finally confessed, he loved me too. I thought I'd just been handed the happy ending I'd dreamed about since I was 12 years old. Instead, he gave me the most heartbreaking betrayal of my life. What he didn't know was that his decision that night would cost him far more than he could ever imagine. 5 years later, karma collected every debt he owed, and I was there to watch it happen. Before we dive into today's unbelievable revenge story, if you love stories where karma always finds the people who deserve it, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another incredible Reddit revenge story. Now let's get into it. This happened back around 1999, when I was 19 years old, and even now, decades later, I still remember every detail like it happened yesterday. Some memories fade with time. This one never did. Maybe because it wasn't just my heart that got broken. It was the future I thought I was about to have. I had just gotten out of a relationship that had lasted almost 5 years. It wasn't an explosive breakup or some dramatic ending. It was simply one of those relationships that slowly dies until one day you finally admit it's over. It hurt, but it also gave me the courage to finally do something I'd wanted to do since middle school. There was this boy. Well, by then he was a man. I'll call him DN. I'd been secretly in love with him since I was 12 years old. 7 years. 7 years of pretending we were just friends. 7 years of convincing myself that someday, somehow, maybe he'd notice me the same way I noticed him. We had always stayed close. We talked regularly, laughed together whenever we saw each other, and every now and then I'd convince myself that maybe, just maybe, there was something there. There had even been one awkward little kiss during our first year of school together. But nothing ever happened after that. I refused to chase him. I believed that if he wanted me, he'd make the first move. He never did. Eventually, life moved on. I left Alaska and moved to the Pacific Northwest with my family. I had already decided I was never moving back, so one day I figured I had absolutely nothing to lose if he rejected me. Fine. At least I'd finally stop wondering. So I called him. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear my own voice. I told him everything. How I'd loved him since we were kids. How I'd always wondered what could have happened if we'd ever given each other a chance. How I expected absolutely nothing from him except honesty. I braced myself for rejection. Instead, he completely shocked me. I've loved you too. I actually froze. He kept talking. He told me he'd always been afraid I'd reject him. That he'd never known how to approach me. That he'd spent years hiding the exact same feelings I'd been hiding. It felt like one of those cheesy romance movies I'd always rolled my eyes at. Except suddenly, I was living it. For the first time in years, the future looked exciting. Maybe leaving Alaska forever wasn't actually permanent. Maybe love had simply arrived 7 years late. Because I had a relative who worked as a pilot, I could travel on standby flights incredibly cheaply. That meant every couple of weeks I flew back to Alaska just to spend time with him. Those trips became the highlight of my life. Every goodbye was difficult. Every reunion felt magical. Even our mutual friends seemed thrilled. Whenever people found out we were finally together, they'd smile and say things like, "I always knew you two would end up together. You guys are perfect." I've been waiting for this since middle school. Hearing those words made me believe I'd made the right choice. Months passed. Then one evening, completely out of nowhere, he proposed. I didn't hesitate. I said yes. I was happier than I'd ever been. Within days, I started making plans to move back to Alaska permanently. I packed nearly everything I owned. I shipped box after box across the country. I quit my job. I said goodbye to friends. I left behind the life I'd spent years building, because I believed I was about to start an even better one with the man I'd loved since childhood. He already had an apartment with a roommate, so we'd live there together until we found our own place. Everything felt perfect. Then, just days before my final flight back to Alaska, something felt different. At first I thought it was stress. I felt nauseous, exhausted. My body just didn't feel normal. Eventually I bought a pregnancy test. I wasn't expecting anything. Honestly, I almost laughed while waiting for the results. Then, 2 pink lines appeared. I stared at them for what felt like forever. I was pregnant. I burst into tears, happy tears. I couldn't stop smiling. This wasn't part of the plan. It was even better. The man I'd loved for 7 years, my fiancé, and now, we were going to have a baby. I couldn't wait to tell him. That evening I called him. There was a party happening at his apartment. Music blasted in the background while people laughed loudly around him. I have some really important news, I told him. Instead of asking what it was, he interrupted me. Oh, before that, I have to tell you about this really cool artist girl who showed up tonight. Something inside me tightened. The excitement in his voice wasn't about me anymore. He spent several minutes talking about this woman, how interesting she was, how talented she seemed, how everyone at the party liked her. I couldn't explain why, but I suddenly felt uncomfortable. A little voice in the back of my head whispered that something wasn't right. I ignored it. I figured maybe I was just emotional because of the pregnancy. So I laughed awkwardly and said something that would haunt me forever. Don't do anything you'll regret tonight, he chuckled. Call me later. Okay. I hung up. A few hours passed. I called him back. Someone else answered the phone. He's here, the person said, but he can't come to the phone right now. My stomach immediately dropped. Every instinct I had screamed that something terrible was happening. I waited. Minutes turned into hours. Hours turned into the middle of the night. He never called back. The next morning, nothing. No phone call. No apology. No explanation. I spent the entire day staring at my phone, convincing myself there had to be some innocent reason. That evening, he finally answered. The moment I heard his voice, I tried to smile. I still have some news for you. He cut me off. I need to tell you something first. Every hair on my body stood up. I already knew. Before he even said the words, I knew. I slept with that girl from the party. Everything around me disappeared. The room, the walls, the furniture. It all blurred together. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I simply stared into nothing as the man I'd loved for 7 years calmly admitted that less than 24 hours after I discovered I was carrying our child. He had cheated on me, and he still had absolutely no idea what I'd been trying so desperately to tell him. He kept talking. I made a mistake. It didn't mean anything. I was drunk. I still love you. Every excuse sounded exactly the same. Meaningless. Cold but empty. I couldn't even hear half of what he was saying anymore. The only thing echoing inside my head was one sentence. I'm pregnant. I had called him to tell him we were going to be parents. Instead, he confessed that he'd slept with another woman before I ever got the chance. Without saying another word, I hung up. The second the call disconnected, I ran to the bathroom and threw up. I don't know if it was morning sickness, heartbreak, or both. Probably both. A few minutes later, my phone started ringing. Again and again, and again, I ignored every call. Eventually, I answered. Not because I wanted to hear him, because I wanted him to hear me. "I hope you'll forgive me," he pleaded. "It was just one mistake. One mistake." That phrase still makes me laugh. Cheating isn't a mistake. Buying the wrong cereal at the grocery store is a mistake. Forgetting someone's birthday is a mistake. Meeting. Another woman at a party, flirting with her all night, taking her home, sleeping with her, and then hiding it until the next day. That's not a mistake. That's a series of decisions, one after another. I took a deep breath. There is absolutely no chance I'm marrying you. Silence. "I'll still come to Alaska." His voice sounded hopeful, but only to collect everything I already shipped there. "And after that? I never want to see you again." It took every ounce of strength I had not to scream. I ended the call before he could try manipulating me again. Then life delivered another devastating blow. Only a few days later, I miscarried. Even now, after all these years, writing those words still hurts. I never got to tell him he was going to be a father. I never got to imagine nursery colors. Never got to hear a heartbeat. The tiny future I'd started dreaming about disappeared almost as quickly as it had arrived. I grieved completely alone. Nobody knew. Not my friends. Not my family. Certainly not him. At that point, I didn't even have the emotional energy to explain what had happened. But there was one problem. Almost everything I owned had already been shipped to Alaska. Boxes full of clothes, books, keepsakes, everything. If I wanted my life back, I had to go get it. A few weeks before Christmas, I boarded a plane with one goal: collect my belongings, ship them home, leave forever. That was the plan. Reality had other ideas. Before I flew out, Dean promised he'd meet me at the airport. I landed, collected my luggage, walked outside, and waited. 10 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. Nothing. No phone call, no apology, no fiancé. Just me. Standing alone in the freezing Alaska winter with nowhere to go. Eventually, an elderly couple approached me. "Sweetheart, are you all right?" The kindness in their voices completely shattered the emotional wall I'd been desperately holding together. My eyes filled with tears. I couldn't even answer them. I muttered, something about being fine before turning away, because I knew if I looked at them for another second I'd completely lose control. I called a cab instead. The ride felt endless. When I finally arrived at his apartment, I stood outside in the freezing cold pounding on the door. No answer. I knocked again and again. Eventually, the roommate answered. I'll call him BM. He looked surprised to see me. "You've been standing out here?" Apparently. He stepped aside immediately. "Come in." DN? Still asleep. Completely passed out. He hadn't forgotten me because something important came up. He forgot because he simply didn't care enough to remember. That realization somehow hurt even more than the cheating. I quietly sat on the living room couch. When he finally woke up hours later, he acted as though almost nothing had happened. No dramatic apology, no tears, no desperate attempt to save the relationship. Just awkward small talk. At that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to become the crazy ex-girlfriend. I wasn't going to scream, throw things, or make scenes. People had known both of us since we were kids. I refused to let him rewrite the story by painting me as unstable. So I stayed calm. Painfully calm. When people asked questions, I answered with facts. Nothing more. Yes. He cheated. No. We're not getting married. I'm just waiting for my boxes before I leave. That was it. No dramatic speeches, no emotional breakdowns in front of anyone. Behind closed doors. That was another story. Every night I cried myself to sleep on that couch, completely silent. I actually taught myself how to cry without making any noise because I didn't want anyone hearing me. Imagine loving someone for 7 years, packing up your entire life, quitting your job, leaving your family, moving hundreds of miles, losing your baby, then sleeping on your cheating fiancé's couch while waiting for your belongings to arrive. I honestly don't know how I survived those 2 weeks. But somehow, it got worse. One afternoon, Deanne casually announced that someone was coming over. A few minutes later, she walked through the front door. The woman he'd cheated on me with. He actually invited her over to meet me. I remember staring at him, wondering if this was some kind of cruel joke. It wasn't. He had told her that I was just an old friend. She had absolutely no idea we'd been engaged. She didn't know I'd been flying across states to see him. She didn't know I had quit my job. She didn't know I was moving there to marry him. She didn't know any of it. To her, I was simply a friend staying on the couch. I suddenly realized something. He wasn't just lying to me. He'd been lying to her too. The entire relationship she thought she had with him was built on the same deception mine had been. For the next several days, she kept coming back. Every single visit felt like another knife twisting deeper into my chest. They laughed together, flirted openly, disappeared into his bedroom. Sometimes while I sat only a few feet away on the living room couch. I could hear everything, every laugh, every door closing, every reminder that the future I'd sacrificed everything for had vanished. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw him out of his own apartment. I wanted to tell her every disgusting thing he'd done. Instead, I stayed silent. Not because he deserved mercy, because I was waiting, and deep inside, without fully realizing it yet. The first pieces of my revenge were already beginning to fall into place. I spent those 2 weeks pretending I was okay. Looking back, I wasn't okay at all. I was completely numb. When someone experiences enough emotional pain all at once, something strange happens. You stop reacting. You stop crying in front of people. You stop asking why. Your brain simply shifts into survival mode. Every morning, I woke up on that couch hoping my shipping boxes would finally arrive. Every evening, I went to bed listening to the man I thought I was going to marry, laugh with the woman he cheated on me with. Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. His roommate, remember BM, the huge guy who looked intimidating enough to bench press a truck? He walked into the living room, looked at me sitting there trying not to cry, and quietly said, "Deanne's a total asshole." That was it. No speech, no lecture, just 5 words. If I were you, I'd be crying too. For some reason, hearing another person acknowledge what I was going through felt like someone finally opened a window in a room that had been suffocating me for weeks. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't the problem. Deanne was. That tiny bit of validation gave me more strength than he probably realized. I still hadn't told anyone about the pregnancy, or the miscarriage. People already looked at me with pity. If I suddenly announced that I'd been pregnant with Deanne's child and lost the baby immediately after he cheated, I knew exactly how some people would react. She's just trying to make him look worse. She's saying that because she's angry. I couldn't bear the thought, so I kept that grief entirely to myself, every single day. Then, an idea crossed my mind. It wasn't fully formed yet. It was just a tiny thought. Deanne clearly hadn't told the other woman the truth. She believed she had met a single guy at a party. She had absolutely no idea he'd proposed to someone else only weeks earlier. She didn't know I'd already moved my entire life for him. She didn't know I'd been sleeping on his couch because my belongings were trapped there. She didn't know any of it. She wasn't innocent. She still chose to sleep with someone she barely knew. But she wasn't the mastermind here. He was. That's when I realized. If anyone deserved to know the truth, it was her. A few nights later, another party started at the apartment. The music was loud. People were drinking. Nobody was paying attention to anyone else. Perfect. I waited until I saw her alone. Then I walked over. "Can we talk?" She smiled politely. "Sure." I led her into Deanne's bedroom and quietly closed the door behind us. Outside, the party continued like nothing had happened. Inside, everything was about to change. We talked. Really talked. She relaxed, surprisingly quickly. One conversation turned into flirting. Flirting turned into something neither of us had expected. By the end of the night, I'd done something that, even today, surprises me when I think back on it. I slept with the woman my fiancé cheated on me with. Was it impulsive? Absolutely. Was it part revenge? Without question. But oddly enough, it wasn't the part that hurt him the most. Afterward, while we sat together in silence, I finally told her everything. I told her about the 7 years, the engagement, the moving trucks, the plane tickets, the boxes, everything. She stared at me in complete disbelief. "He told me you were just an old friend." "I know. He never mentioned any of this." "I know." Her face slowly changed from confusion to guilt, then anger. Not toward me. Toward him. I looked her straight in the eyes and calmly said, "If he'll propose to someone he's known for years, then cheat on her with someone he met the same night." I paused. "What do you think he'll eventually do to you?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The realization was written all over her face. Just then, the bedroom door opened. Deanne walked in. He looked from me to her, then back to me. For a second, I almost expected him to explode. Instead, he froze. His brain simply stopped working. Nobody yelled. Nobody argued. Nobody caused a scene. The silence somehow hurt him more than screaming ever could have. The party continued. She eventually left. The next morning, he confronted me. "What happened between you two?" I looked him directly in the eyes, completely calm. "You thought she was attractive." "Apparently." I shrugged. "So did I." His face turned pale. Then I added the sentence I'll never forget. "She was just as easy for me as she was for you." The expression on his face was priceless. It looked like every ounce of confidence had been vacuumed out of his body. He couldn't think of a response. He simply stood there staring at me, then changed the subject. A few days later, my shipping boxes finally arrived. I mailed every single one back home, packed my suitcase, walked out the front door, and never looked back. I genuinely believed that was the end of the story. I was wrong. 5 years passed. 5 years. During that time, I rebuilt my life. I met an incredible man. We fell in love. We got married. 1 week after learning I was pregnant with our first child together, I received an email from Deanne. I almost deleted it. Instead, curiosity won. He wanted to catch up. Against my better judgment, I agreed to one phone call. The moment we started talking, he sounded different, older, tired, broken. Then he told me something I'll never forget. "You planted a seed that destroyed my entire life." I didn't even have to ask what he meant. He told me everything, almost immediately after I left. The woman he'd cheated with cheated on him, with his best friend. Then she moved in with that friend only 2 weeks later. Ouch. A few days after that, he got fired, on Christmas Eve. His boss had learned how he'd treated me and decided he didn't want someone like that working for him anymore. Then his truck broke down. It had to be towed. He couldn't afford to get it back. So he lost that too. Then his family found out everything. They disowned him, one by one. Everything disappeared. But karma wasn't finished. One night, his remaining friends invited him to another drinking party. He thought they were still on his side. Instead, they got him drunk, beat him up, dragged him outside into the freezing snow, locked the door, and left him there. Eventually, he had no family, no girlfriend, no job, no truck, no friends, nothing. He moved to Texas just to start over, when he finished telling me everything. There was a long silence. Then I realized the time had finally come. There was one truth he'd never known. Quietly, I told him. I was pregnant. Silence. I found out the day before you cheated. Nothing. I called to tell you. Then, I heard it. Sobbing, not polite crying. Ugly crying. The kind where someone can't catch their breath. I didn't know. He kept repeating. I had no idea, I answered calmly. Of course you didn't. You never asked. You were too busy confessing what you'd done to care why I'd called. The crying became louder. He apologized again, and again, and again. More apologies than I'd heard from anyone in my entire life. By then, they meant absolutely nothing. Before hanging up, I simply said, "It's okay. I don't hate you." I didn't tell him I pitied him. I didn't have to. Instead, I told him the truth. I'm married now. My husband loves me. And we're expecting our first baby. Another long silence. We ended the call. He never contacted me again. Looking back now, I realized something I couldn't understand when I was 19. I thought I lost the love of my life. I hadn't. I escaped the biggest mistake of my life. If he hadn't cheated, I probably would have married him, raised children with him, built a future with someone who only cared about himself. Instead, life gave me something infinitely better. A husband who keeps his promises. A family built on honesty and peace I never thought I'd find again. Sometimes revenge isn't destroying someone. Sometimes revenge is surviving long enough to watch their own choices destroy them. If this story reminded you that karma always has perfect timing, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments. Do you think karma did enough? Or did DN deserve even more? As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next Reddit revenge story.